how do you bring something to market that's already been brought to market? Like, you're not the first venture fund ever. You're not the first strategy or private equity, infrastructure, debt fund. Like, you're not the first. So like, what is the opportunity that you're actually exploiting to capture value in this current market environment? That's a lot harder kind of thing to kind of tease out, discover, and kind of present as a package to LPs.
All right. Welcome to Tech Scenes.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me. Grabbing you from the Milken Conference. How's that going?
Great.
Is this
Very
the
productive.
first time that you've been to it?
The one here, yeah, the global conference.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get into it. For people that don't know, tell me about Coolwater.
So Coolwater is an incubator and accelerator for emerging managers. We founded it with the concept of emerging managers may need some help in the early days. So similar to, if you think about what an accelerator does, is it helps early stage technology companies develop in the early days. And we do the same thing, but with emerging manager funds. So we help great investors kind of develop their business in the early days.
Emerging managers. I mean, I think that's a phrase that you use a lot, but some people might get confused about what that means. How do you define that?
Yeah, an emerging manager, you're right. Like, that is a tough term. We've tried to redefine it as alpha generators. So who are those investors that are doing something unique or differentiated in the ecosystem from an investment perspective? And we look to find those great investors, mainly in the US, but really anywhere globally. If we find someone that's doing something unique in healthcare or deep tech or, Web3 or, whatever the new AI, whatever the new kind of technology wave is, who are the right teams that are there ready to tackle the next great investment technology wave.
Right.
And then we can help them set up their businesses. So, that's something you have to do, that any investor has to do if they want to build a portfolio. They have to set up their investment firm, their business. And so we help them set up their business. So we're not necessarily training them to be great investors. We're looking for great investors, and then we're helping them build a business around that investment acumen or strategy they already have.
It's kind of similar to what I do with venture teams in some aspects. It's kind of, you're kind of, tell me if I'm right, are you giving them a bit of an operating system though, to learn how to operate?
100%.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So frameworks, best practices, right? Like, how do you do this? Like, my philosophy is I don't think you need to recreate the wheel every single time you build a car.
Right.
And so how do you actually, give people these frameworks that can simplify their lives, save them time, save them money, get into business faster. And again, if you're smart and you've been doing this for a while, right? Like, you just want to continue that journey. I've already been investing for 10 years.
Yeah.
I now want to be a fund manager. How do I get into this game very quickly?
Right.
So we give them that kind of package, that framework to get into the game like very quickly. And historically, this has taken, 1 to 5 years to kind of like iterate, build, kind of like figure it all out. And we're kind of like packaging that and saying like, hey, you can do this in a matter of months through our accelerator. We're going to teach you everything you need to know to launch your fund.
Right. That's awesome. Tell me a little bit more behind the why behind it. Like, why did you see a gap in the market? Is it like just a passion thing, or, what brought you to this?
It felt like there's a gap in the market. So, again, it depends on how you define emerging managers. Like, some people define emerging managers as $1 billion in AUM, for their first fund. Like, we define it as a smaller fund. And so there was a gap in the market from the value-added services perspective. Like, how do you actually help an investor build an investment firm, like an investment business?
Yep.
There wasn't a platform that could do that or would do that.
Right.
There were LPs allocating capital into smaller funds, but there wasn't like a value-added services platform that could help emerging investors kind of figure it all out. So Coolwater is that. Like we tried to fill that gap. The other gap was, in order to get into business as a emerging manager, you need to raise a fund, right?
Right.
And like that was just an underserved part of the market as well. So broker dealers, they would, they're really kind of looking for bigger funds, like 200 million, 250 million plus in terms of a target fund size.
Mm-hmm.
And, that smaller part of the market, like emerging managers and venture capital in particular, a lot of them are, sub $100 million.
Right.
And so you didn't really have someone that could like help you figure it out from the fundraising perspective. And that's a matter like, how do you, like what marketing materials do you develop? Like, how do you build your data room? Like, how do you figure out a fundraising strategy? Like all these things that are more strategic in nature and sometimes just, normal blocking and tackling. Like there wasn't, again, like a support network or a support ecosystem to like help you do that. And so our, theory or hypothesis was, well, if we build kind of a cohort model accelerator, maybe that would be the thing that could help these managers kind of get off the ground faster.
Right. And the first book that you wrote is How to Raise a Venture Fund. Is that correct? So what would you say is the number one mistake that you see most often when people are trying to raise a venture fund?
That's a great question. I think there's a few answers to the question, but if you just are having me pick one, the one thing I think most managers get wrong is not understanding what else is in the market.
Mm-hmm.
So Coolwater met with over 1,000 managers last year, right? If you don't meet with a large part of the market, you don't actually know what different looks like, right? Or what, a strategy should be in order to like capture alpha in that market. And so again, like you might get lucky, but I think it does help. Like fundraising is kind of positioning, it's strategic positioning of like your firm and your fund relative to other things in the market. So if you come like and present to an LP and you sound like the 50th person that's presented that strategy, like check out my cool AI fund, and there's no like perspective there or nuance into like what other AI funds are doing, or like where do you sit, or like how do you actually play this market from an investor perspective?
Right.
I think that's the biggest one, where people think like it's the blocking and tackling of, hey, I built another house. It's like, great, that's another house, but it's not like a unique house, right? It's not like you're going to get LPs to like buy that house because it just looks like any other house.
Right. It's kind of almost like product market fit. It's investment market fit.
Yeah.
Would that be similar?
Very much so. Yeah. So like, and I think that's not having that perspective. I think that's what you can get from Coolwater.
Right.
But there's other things as well, right? Like not having a very clear thesis, not having kind of your strategy is going to get dialed in over time and it's going to be constantly evolving. But again, like what's your, strategy to capture alpha that's repeatable? Like a lot of people, they don't have like, the strategy isn't just like, I'm going to invest into early stage technology companies like you and every other VC fund. Right. So what is different here that you're doing that's fundamentally unique, that you can bring to the table, that no one else can bring to the table, that is going to like, again, strategically position you as something that's like very different, that's coming to market. And like, that's what's going to pique the interest of LPs and investors.
And so seeing all these emerging managers, what you're saying, you often see a lot of them are saying the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's like, I'm going to bring bottled water to market, right? It's like, I have a spring, I have a water bottling plant, I have, the suppliers lined up, the bottle, the cap, and I'm just gonna like bring it to market. And like, it's like, okay, well, there's 500 other water bottling people that are gonna bring like water bottles to market as well, like this year. So it's like, where's the uniqueness there, right? It's like, and then you can start to think about like, it's a very straightforward example, but like, how do you bring something to market that's already been brought to market? Like, you're not the first venture fund ever.
Right.
You're not the first, whatever strategy is, private equity, infrastructure, debt fund, like you're not the first. So like, what is the opportunity that you're actually exploiting to capture value in this current market environment? That's a lot harder kind of thing to kind of tease out, discover, and kind of present as a package to LPs.
You've probably experienced something similar to what I have. Is my background is basically organizing venture-backed companies at the early stage and growth stage. I worked with a ton of them over the years, and now I have the opportunity to work with even more and more and more, and I start to see the same things over and over again,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I'm sure with all the people that you're meeting with, you're seeing these same simple problems to solve over and over again that they don't see, because they're always wanting, especially in our market, our world, everybody wants to reinvent the wheel. We're all creators, right? And some of the things just don't need to be recreated.
Yeah, there's working in the business, there's working on the business, and there's perspective over time.
Right.
So working in the business, like you're a founder, this is the first time you're doing it, like you're just so deep in it. You're working in the business. Like you don't take a step back to work on the business, kind of say like, hey, let me do like a strategic offsite and figure out like what's going wrong. Like I'm doing really well, but maybe you could be doing better.
Yeah.
If you like thought about like on the business instead of just working in the business. So I think that's something. And then over time you've seen enough, right? This was why I started iterating on this concept like 8 years ago. Over time, it's like you've seen. I love it when I get a question I haven't been asked before. Like it really excites me. I'm like, okay, ready to write the next book. But it's that, and that's part of the reason why I started this in the first place, because like you start to get the same question over and over and over again. And if you have an efficiency mindset, you're just kind of saying like, why, right? Like we can move the ball forward, right? Like we can create more alpha, in my perspective, if we actually just like answer those low-hanging fruit questions. Like why does that need to be hidden from people, right? And like give them that advantage, and then like all of society moves forward. Yeah, it's just like if everyone's tripping up on the same mistakes, and like you don't get to stand on the shoulder of giants, like nothing really progresses, right? So fundamentally, again, that's more philosophical, but fundamentally, like how do you actually move venture capital forward? Like how do you move these technology curves forward? You don't do it by like having the smartest people in the world, the most ambitious people in the world, the next generation of best investors, like keep on tripping up on these same mistakes, right? That have already been solved. It's just like solve them for them, right? And so they can get to business faster. And I think that's where you start to create like true impact in the ecosystem.
Right. And some of those things that you see over and over again are fairly easy, like you said, like you've seen them so many times, it's easy to solve them. But I think it's in the nuances sometimes for some people that they get a little bit lost in some of these easy nuances, but someone that's seen something over and over again, the nuances are kind of basic to them.
Yeah, maybe it's the difference between like blocking and tackling consulting versus like advisory, like strategic advisory. Or like the consulting is just like, hey, here's how to do it. Like, here's the package for how to do it. It's been done before. Like, you're not reinventing the wheel. The advisory is that nuance. It's like, hey, there's a couple different paths you can go. Like, this is a very impactful decision, right, that you have to make now. It's not just like, here's your fund formation docs, and like, these are the terms you should be using. Like, let's set that up quickly. All right, now you're ready to go. It's like, yeah, you're making a strategic decision for your business. And it's like, that's the fun stuff. Like, but it's like, let's get to that, because that actually moves the needle. Or it's like that investment debate of like, okay, where is the world going in terms of this technology curve? Like, what should I be making a bet on, right? Because that's like fundamental to the thesis. Like, those are the conversations I believe people should be having, not necessarily like the blocking and tackling, like the easy, low-hanging fruit stuff that should just be solved for people already.
So let's talk about your second book, How to Set Up a Venture Capital Fund. Tell me a little bit about that book and why you wrote that.
Yeah, so the first book, How to Raise a Venture Capital Fund, I think is the first step, right? It's the existential step. It's, I need to raise some money if you're going to be a fund manager. Right? But then, like, what are you managing? You're managing both a business and a fund, right? So that's the firm and the fund. Like, the firm is the business of your venture capital firm, like it is the business. And the venture capital fund is like the portfolio of investments that you have to manage. So the book actually goes into both firm and fund. I just kind of like to keep it simple. I said how to set up a venture capital fund. But it talks about both like those initial things you should do to set up an investment firm, but also the initial things you should think about and do as you're setting up your fund. So you're getting yourself in a position to actually manage the portfolio investments. So it's pretty straightforward. It's kind of built in, a couple of main sections. Like, one of them is, this is what you need to do initially, basically to set up like think of it as like your sales and marketing engine. Right. Like, you shouldn't spend a lot of money. You should set up this part of your business to actually like test the hypothesis. Like, do you have something here? Right. And if you do, and people are like, wow, like, this is amazing, greatest thing since sliced bread, then you move on to like step two. Step two is like, the actual, okay, you're becoming a fund manager, right? So there's a whole new set of steps that you need to actually pay for and set up. It's a much more expensive part of the process,
Right.
because you're actually becoming a fund manager, right? But again, like that initial thing is you can test it. The second thing is like it's actually working. So then you actually like, you get into business. And then there's a third section, which is like these, higher level concepts you should be thinking about, which is, really where Coolwater kind of sits. It's as you think about institutionalizing, you have to really internalize all these new concepts, fiduciary responsibility, portfolio management, like all of these things that you have to end up doing, like skill sets of a fund manager. And so that's kind of how the book is structured, and kind of what, what it's for is, again, helping people avoid some of these early mistakes as they're thinking about setting up a fund or testing out a fund hypothesis. So what we're trying to do is bring more talented investors, like existing investors, people that have a right to be in the ecosystem, and kind of partner with founders and help build like great next generation companies, like
Right.
give them kind of a playbook to at least test out, like, is this something I want to do?
Now, the last couple of years have been kind of challenging for venture capital and raising funds. I feel like there's more investors out there than ever, and there's more dry powder out there than ever, but it has been a little bit slower reaching its way to some of these early stage, growth stage companies. How has that impacted you and the work that you've been doing?
I think for Coolwater, what we're trying to do is work with people that really want to do this.
Right.
Like who actually wants to be a fund manager. It's not an easy job, right? And, to the point of how to raise a venture capital fund, you have to raise capital. How to set up a venture capital fund, you have to do operations.
Right.
Both of those aren't investing, right? So then you have a third hat, like a third job, which is, how to invest, right? Like, so again, like we're looking for investors, and then we're trying to help them with operations, help them with fundraising, like kind of make those, two other hats like a lot easier.
Yep.
And so in this market, like when the market's challenged, I do think it is helpful to have this platform that helps you with those other things. Like the job of venture capital hasn't gotten easier in this market, it's actually gotten harder. So again, like, is there someone trying to support you?
So tell me a little bit how Coolwater's structured and how it's set up and what the program looks like.
Yeah, so Coolwater has 3 programs. Think of it as like early program, kind of the core program, and then kind of, once you launch your fund, a program to support you after you launch your fund. So that first program is called Explore. It's really looking for early investor talent. And if you're not quite ready to be a fund manager, which is a lot of responsibility, like you're taking other people's money, you're managing their money and you're investing their money, that's a big responsibility. So do you even want to do that? There's kind of a program that kind of helps you build a track record while thinking about, is this the next right step? Our core program, again, like kind of talked about that a little bit, but operations, fundraising, like what do you need to do to get set up?
Right.
Like what's the LP perspective? How do you strategically position your fund? Very focused on like, hey, let's help you launch your fund. For fund 2s and fund 3s, that can also be relevant, where it's like, hey, let me go back to first principles. Let me make sure I kind of built it the right way. Let me get plugged in this ecosystem of like-minded people that are kind of like having the shared experience that I'm having. That core program is like relevant for fund 1s as well as fund 2s and fund 3s. And then, if you launch your fund, you may want support on the back office side, on the operational side. So we've actually launched a third program that is more focused on kind of, if you were to hire a CFO, like what that CFO would recommend and help you figure out. Because the gap of going from fund 1 to fund 2 or fund 2 to fund 3, it might be harder to raise fund 2 than it is to raise fund 1, right? It might be harder to raise fund 3 than it is to raise fund 2. So are you giving yourself the most advantage? And again, Coolwater is supporting the emerging manager journey, which isn't defined by a fund number. It's defined by like you scaling up and becoming institutional. So those are kind of our 3 programs and kind of how it works. But I'd say like there's a core program and then those 2 ancillary programs.
I love how it's like a learn by doing type program. It's like people in it doing it versus like getting like an education in it and then trying to get out in the field and trying to do it. I feel like I studied entrepreneurship back in the 90s, and I had started 3 businesses in college. I had like what I would call one real business that I ended up selling at the end of that. But I was actually able to learn and do and, iterate and change because I was having education and I had a community as well. And that sounds like what's happening with Coolwater too. It's like you've created like an ecosystem with this program. Is that right?
You have to, like, you're setting up a business that's doing, you're investing, that's doing. You're managing a portfolio, that's like doing. Like all those things, like you have to be doing it. Like there's that, chasm between theory and practice. And I think initially like throwing myself under the bus, but like initially I felt like it would be education, that people can kind of take it away and do it. But like, I think it's turned more into like a program where it's like, hey, let's actually do this in real time and implement in real time. Like there's theory, yes, right? Because you need to like understand the big picture and the perspective. But yeah, fundamentally, this is like we're looking for doers. Like when we're looking for fund managers, these great investors, like they have founder mentality, right? They are founders of businesses. Those businesses just happen to be investment firms. And like founders are doers. Like they do the work of like 10 people in a day. And it's like, those are the people we're looking for. Like I mentioned, you have to wear multiple hats as a fund manager, right? Like, so we're trying to sort those people out and figure out like, yeah, who actually wants to do this work? And like, we don't need everyone in the world to be a fund manager. We need the people that are most aligned with LPs, their founders. Like we need those people that really want to do this long term to be in business, right? And like, again, like we don't want it to be hard for the right people to do this, but we do want to make sure like we're getting the right people involved, because again, this is the person that these are the people that are going to finance early stage capital markets, which is a very instrumental part of our society.
What personas and personality traits do you find are the best fund managers?
Obsessive, meticulous, like aggressive, not in a bad way, but just like very good at kind of like sales and following up. Creative in a way, right? Like you're building a business, but also like willing to kind of just they don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you want to get there faster.
Right.
So you're willing to kind of like borrow designs that already make sense. It really is like, if you're looking at like great attributes of a founder of a technology company, I think like they share a lot in common with like great founders of investment firms, which is why I think like a lot of founders of technology companies kind of do this as a second career.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I find like some of the best founders are ones that are interested, willing to learn, right? They want to build something. They want to make an impact more than financial impact. They're driven by something. So yeah, I would say that it seems like it's really similar characteristics to founders.
They have something to offer founders, right? So that's usually like they've been there, done that.
Yep.
There can also be some good, call them like board member investors, which they've never like built like a really successful company, but they've seen enough reps to actually understand when to offer feedback and when to know like they're not offering like great feedback. It's like that mentality of, how do I help 20 companies instead of one company? Like that comes up a lot. And it's usually like a founder that's been there, done that. That's like, hey, I could do another company and like, drive impact that way with like one company at a time, or I could take all of my learnings, right? I think I can actually drive more impact over the next couple decades by being an investor, being a fund manager.
I think this is the mall or something that you're probably looking for, right?
Yeah, this is it.
Okay. I want to ask you one last question. And this is probably the most important question that you're ever going to have in your life, actually. So I don't know if you're ready for this, but let's say you're trapped on a desert island. You're going to be there the rest of your life. You have food, shelter, and you have a boombox, like out of the 80s, with unlimited batteries. And you can only choose one album to listen to the rest of your life.
Just anything AC/DC.
Really?
Probably Hell's Bells or something.
That didn't take you long at all. That is awesome. AC/DC. You know why they call themselves AC/DC, right?
Tell me.
They only know 3 chords, A, C, and D.
Well, that keeps it simple on the island. Coconuts and 3 chords.
That'd be the problem, is breaking strings. That'd be the biggest problem being on a desert island. Cool. Well, thanks for joining me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Lots of stimuli.
right?
First driving interview.